Let me continue to read physicist David Bohm's book, Wholeness and the Implicate Order. Introduction, the second part. In Chapter 1, it is shown that science itself is demanding a new, non-fragmentary worldview, in the sense that the present approach of analysis of the world into independently existent parts does not work very well in modern physics. It is shown that both in relativity theory and quantum theory, notions implying the undivided wholeness of the universe would provide a much more orderly way of considering the general nature of reality. In Chapter 2, we go into the role of language in bringing about a fragmentation of thought. It is pointed out that the subject-verb-object structure of a modern language implies that all action arises in a separate subject and acts either on a separate object or else reflexively on itself. This pervasive structure leads in the whole of life to a function that divides the totality of existence into separate entities, which are considered to be essentially fixed and static in their nature. We then inquire whether it is possible to experiment with new language forms in which the basic role will be given to the verb rather than to the noun. Such forms will have as their content a series of actions that flow and merge into each other, without sharp separations or breaks. Thus, both in form and in content, the language will be in harmony with the unbroken, flowing movement of existence as a whole. What is proposed here is not a new language as such, but rather a new mode of using the existing language, the real mode, that is a flowing mode. We develop such a mode as a form of experimentation with language, which is intended merely to give insight into the fragmentary function of the common language, rather than to provide a new way of speaking that can be used for practical communications. In Chapter 3, the same questions are considered within a different context. It begins with a discussion of how reality can be considered as, in essence, a set of forms in an underlying universal moment or process, and then ask how our knowledge can be considered in the same manner. Thus, the way could be opened for a worldview in which consciousness and reality would be fragmented from each other. This question is discussed at length, and we arrive at the notion that our general worldview is itself an overall moment of thought, which has to be visible in the sense that the totality of activities that flow out of it are generally in harmony, both in themselves and with regard to the whole of existence. Such harmony is seen to be possible only if the worldview itself takes part in an unending process of development, evolution, and unfoldment, which fits as part of the universal process that is the ground of all existence. The next 3 chapters are rather more technical and mathematical. However, large parts of them should be comprehensible to the non-technical reader, as the technical parts are not entirely necessary for comprehension, although they add significant content for those who can follow them. Chapter 4 deals with hidden variables in the quantum theory, The quantum theory is, at present, the most basic way available in physics for understanding the fundamental and the universal laws relating to matter and its movement. As such, it must clearly be given serious consideration in any attempt to develop an overall world viewing. The quantum theory, as it is now constituted, presents us with a very great challenge. If we are at all interested in such a venture, for in this theory, there is no consistent notion at all of what the reality may be that underlies the universal constitution and structure of matter. Thus, if we try to use the prevailing world view based on the notion of particles, we discover that the particles, such as electrons, can also manifest as waves, that they can move discontinuously, that there are no laws at all that apply in detail to the actual movement of individual particles, and that only statistical predictions can be made about large aggregates of such particles. If, on the other hand, we apply the world view in which the universe is regarded as a continuous field, we find that this field must also be continuous, as well as particle-like, and that is, it is as undermined in its actual behavior as it is required in the particle view of a relation as a whole. It seems clear, then, that we are faced with a deep and radical fragmentation, as well as a thorough-going confusion, if we try to think of what could be the reality that is treated by our physical laws. At present, physicists tend to avoid this issue by adopting the attitude that our overall views concerning the nature of the reality are of little or no importance. All that counts in physical theory is supposed to be the development of mathematical equations that permit us to predict and control the behavior of large statistical aggregates of particles. Such a goal is not regarded as merely for its pragmatic and technical utility. Rather, it has become a presupposition of most work in modern physics that prediction and control of this kind is all the human knowledge is about. This sort of presupposition is indeed in accord with the general spirit of our age, but it is my main proposal in this book that we cannot thus simply dispense with an overall world view. If we try to do so, we will find that we are left with whatever generally inadequate world views may happen to be at hand. Indeed, one finds that the physicists are not actually able just to engage in calculations aimed at prediction and control. They do find it necessary to use images based on some kind of general notions concerning the nature of reality, such as the particles that are the building blocks of the universe. But these images are now highly confused. In short, we are here confronted with an example of how deep and strong is the need for some kind of a notion of reality in our thinking, even if it be fragmentary and muddled. My suggestion is that at each stage, the proper order of operation of the mind requires an overall grasp of what is generally known not only in formal, logical, mathematical terms, but also intuitively in images, feelings, poetic usage of language, etc. This kind of overall way of thinking is not only a fertile source of new theoretical ideas. It is needed for the human mind to function in a generally harmonious way, which could in turn help to make possible an orderly and stable society. As indicated in the earlier chapters, however, this requires a continual flow and development of our general notions of reality. Chapter 4 is then concerned with making a beginning in the process of developing a coherent view of what kind of reality might be the basis of the correct mathematical predictions achieved in the quantum theory. Such attempts have generally been received among the community of physicists in a somewhat confused way, for it is widely felt that if there is to be any general world will, it should be taken as the received and final notion concerning the nature of reality. But my attitude has, for the beginning, been that our notions concerning cosmology and the general nature of reality are in a continuous process of development, and that one may have to start with ideas that are merely some sort of improvement over what has thus far been available, and to go on from there to ideas that are better. Chapter 4 presents the real and several problems that confront any attempt to provide a consistent notion of a quantum mechanical reality, and indicates a certain preliminary approach to a solution of these problems in terms of hidden variables. In Chapter 5, a different approach to the same problem is explored. This is an inquiry into our basic notions of order. Order in its totality is evidently, ultimately undefinable, in the sense that it pervades everything that we are and do. However, in physics, the basic order has for centuries been that of the Cartesian rectilinear grid, extended slightly in the theory of relativity to the curvilinear grid. Physics has had an enormous development during this time, with the appearance of many radically new features, but the basic order has remained essentially unchanged. The Cartesian order is suitable for analysis of the world into separately existent parts, that is, for example, particles to field elements. In this chapter, however, we look into the nature of order with a greater generality and depth, and discover that both the relativity and in quantum theory, the Cartesian order is leading to serious contradictions and confusion. This is because both theories imply that the actual state of affairs is unbroken wholeness of the universe, rather than analysis into independent parts. Nevertheless, the two theories differ radically in their detailed notions of order. Thus, in relativity, movement is continuous, causally determinate, and well-defined. While in quantum mechanics, it is discontinuous, not causally determinate, and not well-defined. Each theory is committed to its own notions of essentially static and fragmentary modes of existence. One thus sees that a new kind of a theory is needed, which drops these basic commitments and at most recovers some essential features of the older theories as abstract forms derived from a deeper reality in which what prevails is unbroken wholeness. In Chapter 6, we go further to begin a more concrete development of a new notion of order that may be appropriate to a universe of unbroken wholeness. This is the implicate or unfolded order. In unfolded order, space and time are no longer the dominant factors determining the relationships of dependence or independence of different elements. Rather, an entirely different sort of a basic connection of elements is possible, from which our ordinary notions of space and time, along with those of separately existent material particles, are abstracted as forms derived from the deeper order. These ordinary notions, in fact, appear in what is called the explicate or unfolded order, which is special and distinguished from content within the general totality of all the implicate orders. In Chapter 6, the implicate order is introduced in a general way and discussed mathematically in the appendix. The 7th and the last chapter, however, is a more developed presentation of the implicate order, along with its relationship to consciousness. This leads to an indication of some lines along which it may be possible to meet the urgent challenge to develop a cosmology and a set of general notions concerning the nature of reality that are proper to our time. Finally, it is hoped that the presentation of the material in these essays may help to convey to the reader how the subject itself has actually unfolded, so that the form of the book is, as it were, an example of what may be meant by the content. That's the end of the introduction.